baby. Why did you dye your hair? Find everything I need to do. All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to do a quick introduction of Mission West Virginia and what we do, and then I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Sykes. We are super excited. We love your curriculum, so we're really glad that you could join us for this today. Looks like we have 53 participants today. Okay, so real quick, who we are at Mission West Virginia. Our mission statement is that we change the lives of youth and families. We promote positive futures by recruiting foster families, providing life skills education, and creating community connections. We do that primarily through two programs. The first one is Frameworks, which helps to recruit foster and adoptive families. So there's a little quick overview of Frameworks. If you're interested in foster or adoption and you live in West Virginia, you can call our office and Cheryl will be happy to answer any questions for you. All that information can also be found on our website. Then we have the THINK program, which is the program that I work for. We do teen pregnancy prevention education, but we work and collaborate with a lot of other organizations so that we can do high-risk behavior prevention just in general. And we have been able to provide over 100,000 students and adults across 29 counties in the state with our healthy relationship education or teen pregnancy prevention education and information. We also do workshops and trainings, and some of those include a hidden in plain sight, where we will set up kind of like a teenage bedroom display and allow families to go through, adults, we do this for over age 21, to see if they notice small details of signs of high-risk behavior in their youth. And that's always a fun presentation. That is not correct, sorry. CEUs are available for this for this webinar. We're super excited to finally be able to offer those for you. So there's 1.5 CEUs available for social workers and 1.8 CEUs available for nurses. This presentation will be available for a week to view. If you would like to, if you need to catch up on it later, if you need to sign off, if you know anyone who would be interested later, they can go to our website and get the information, and we will be submitting the CEU information in 2 weeks. I will also send out an evaluation once this one is complete, and for you to submit if you do want the CEUs. So I can get all the paperwork in. And that is it for me. And I am still learning how to navigate Zoom.
No worries. Me too.
You're good too. You are good to go though, guys. That's all I have. If you have any questions about the CEUs or today's presentation, please just email me, and I'll put my email up on the chat. It's hgore@missionwv.org, or you can go to our website and send in a communication email that way. Either way, I'll get the information. So, and I will give you guys a call back or an email back. Okay, I'm good. Do you want to do a little intro of yourself?
Yeah, and if I could share my screen, if that's okay with my presentation, is that all right?
Yes, yes.
Awesome. Well, yeah, let me get this set up here real fast, everybody. There. Hopefully everyone can see the PowerPoint that I'm pulling up here. And thank you all for being on this webinar. Yeah, my name is Ted Sykes. I am with the Children's Home Society of North Carolina. And I am the business development manager for a program called Wise Guys. And Wise Guys has been around since 1990. And we've been working with young men for, a number of years. This is really like our 30-year anniversary, in fact. Working with guys directly, we have programming that we do like Wise Guys here in North Carolina. But then for a long time, we've also been training other people how to replicate it. And so for this webinar, just to let you all know, of course, there is a disclaimer that we do have a business interest and that we do sell this program. And so if you are interested in more about that and want to talk to me later, I'll have some contact info at the very end. But for the purpose of our webinar today, the information we're going to share and the lessons that we're also going to share, you can use whether you buy Wise Guys or not, okay? And so, yeah, we'll be sharing some experiences working with young men. I encourage you guys to jump in with questions at the end. And so I'll be talking quite a bit. And if you have questions, you can type them in the chat box, and we'll definitely leave some room at the very end with about 15 minutes or so to answer some of those questions. And then if you feel like you have more things you want to talk about, you can definitely email me directly, and I'll have that information up here at the end. Very good. And while I'm going to try to multitask here, guys. So let me news share. While I go through some of the intro stuff here and the objectives, if you have let's see here if I can find it. If you have a phone that you want to also play along with us, we're going to do a Kahoot here in a second. And so I'll just come back to it this way. So if you want to prepare ahead of time while we go through some of the intro stuff, you'll want to either on a separate tab on your computer or on your cell phone, go to www.kahoot.it. And we will get this game started in just a minute, but I wanted to try to make this as engaging and fun as I could. Normally, of course, we do these types of webinars and trainings in person, but we know this is the new normal. And so I was looking for a way to try to make it interactive. And so we're going to do Kahoot in just a little bit. And that's, again, Kahoot, Kahoot.it. And we'll wait for people to get set up on that. And while that's happening, here's our objectives for our webinar today. We're going to talk some about masculinity and some of the culture norms that guys wrestle with on a daily basis and how they can impact and influence their sexual health. We're also going to talk about some lessons that address that. And when you finish the webinar today, you will have a lesson in your toolbox, if you want, that can address masculine norms and how to help your young men kind of break out and be who they want to be. The second piece we're going to talk about a little bit is talking about reproductive anatomy in its as it applies to teen and unplanned pregnancy prevention. And so when you leave today, you'll also have a tool in your toolbox to address that topic. And then lastly, we'll also, since we have an opportunity working with young men, we want to do as much as we can on talking about healthy relationships and sexual violence prevention, knowing that most young men are really good guys, and that there's things that they can do to speak up when they see things or hear things from other people that can kind of lead to more sexual violence or just the acceptance of those things. And so we'll talk a little bit about another lesson you can use if you're working with young men and how to address sexual violence prevention as well. And so when you leave today, hopefully you'll have a couple tools that you'll feel pretty good about to address some of these issues. All right. And like I mentioned just a little bit ago, present circumstances. So we're going to talk with some of these tools about how to use them or some ways to modify them for online work. So if you're using Zoom or something like Zoom and you're going to be teaching or working with young men over the coming year, we'll talk about some ways that you can address that. And then we'll also talk about some ways you can do some of the same lessons in person, which hopefully can happen in the future, if not now. Very good. And so, yeah, as you have questions, just feel free to type them in the chat box and we'll address them at the end. And I really appreciate you guys being here. So let's play Kahoot. And we're going to kahoot.it. And I am going to, hopefully now, share my Kahoot. There it is. Yay. All right. So on kahoot.it, if you're playing along with us, here's the pin that you're going to type in where it asks for a game pin. So you're just going to type in 309150. And then, yeah, you can put any nickname you want in. And if you've never played Kahoot before, when you answer a question, these will all be multiple choice. So you'll have 4 options, and once you tap on the option that you think is the answer, there is no going back. You get points for as the faster you answer, and of course answering correctly. Okay, and so we'll give another let's say 1 minute for as many people as want to participate and can participate to join. And while we're doing this, let's play a little bit of music with it. Hopefully you guys can hear this. If I play some music with it. Maybe not. Or maybe when I start it, it'll play. All right, we got about a minute. For anybody else who wants to join in. All right, and I'm seeing lots of participants, and that's awesome to see. I really appreciate you guys participating. I know some webinars you're just like, okay, I'm just going to play this and maybe I'll do some dishes or something or do something else and it can play in the background. But I totally appreciate you guys jumping in here and playing along with us. All right, about 10 seconds and then we'll get started. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, here we go. And there's only 5 questions, so have fun and good luck. Here we go. Question 1, which of the following stores sperm? And your timer's there with about 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Time's up. All right, well done. Yeah, that's a toughie, very toughie. Here we go. Next question. Question 2. Oh yeah, let's see how we're doing. At WAG. All right, congrats. Love Muffin in second. Nice job. Here we go. Question 2. The pullout method or withdrawal method is risky because of which of the following? Three, two, one. Ah, well done. All right, we had lots of people get that one. Good job. How are we doing on score? All right, getting closer. Question 3. Each egg in the ovaries is the size of which of the following? And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, time. Ah, well done. Excellent. Question 4, we got 2 more to go. Question 4, how many sperm are in one ejaculation? In 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and time. Very good. Last question, and this is for all the marbles. Here we go. During sex, what is the longest period of time that some sperm may survive after an ejaculation? In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Time's up. Let's see who our winners are. Top 3 people. All right, congrats. Very well done. All right, so that's just one way to make some of your lessons more interactive, and some of you might already be thinking about or have been using Kahoot. If not, Kahoot is totally free. And you can easily make up questions and select the correct answer. You can do true, false. You can do typed in questions or type in answers and have them actually type in what they want to say. There's lots of different options. And so it's just one way to try to make things more interactive. All right, let me jump back to my PowerPoint here. Very good. Okay. All right. So in person, we could also do this as a relay race. And usually what we are kind of looking at here is if you're kind of covering or reviewing reproductive anatomy, you might have some of the questions that we talked about just in our Kahoot as part of that relay race, where they have to take the baton or the marker. They break up into teams, and then when that person has the baton or the marker, it's their turn to go up to the whiteboard and write their answer down. And then they have to come back to the next person who would grab the marker and do something like that. You can also just have the anatomy diagrams. And then just on the board, number between, say, 1 and 16, if you're using the diagrams like these as an example. And all they have are the numbers, and they have to identify the proper names for some of the parts that are on the diagram. And then for each team, whoever has the most correct, then they might win a prize or they win the competition. And so that's just one activity in trying to make the anatomy lesson, for example, interactive. Some classes, especially if it's a traditional school setting, they might just sit there with a handout and talk about these things, and that can be effective, sure. But if you're working with guys, anytime you can get them out of their chairs, of course, right, where it's more kinetic, it's hands-on, where they can have a marker and write something on the board, or even if it's online, something like a competitive game like in Kahoot, it could be a lot more engaging. Guys are going to be a lot more likely to respond and ask questions, and they can make the lesson a lot more entertaining as well for the gentleman. So that's just one example, a quick, easy way to modify something that you might already have in your toolbox, but I just wanted to share that with you. And the guys usually enjoy that kind of stuff, where they get to ask questions, of course, and they also get a chance to get out of their seats if it's something in person. All right, we're going to transition now into just some basic tips, and this is probably review, but just some ways to engage young men. We've already talked about a few with our lesson there with our Kahoot, but when it comes to building rapport, right, we want to be authentic, we want to be ourselves, we want to be positive, and by positive, I mean that we want to show that we enjoy working with guys. Young people, especially guys, can pick up when someone is just there for, just picking up a paycheck, or they're just kind of going through the motions or whatnot. But if they can really see that the person they're talking to cares, that they're engaging, that they want to help, that they're asking some of those open-ended questions to try to get more information out from young people, then that helps to build rapport. And this kind of information that we're talking about today, whether it's reproductive anatomy, other things around sexual health, healthy relationships, healthy masculinity, you've really got to build that rapport, right? It's real key the first day, building that trust and that connection with these young people, especially guys, if we want to help them reconsider maybe some behaviors that they've had in the past or behaviors that they might have in the future, right? And so it's all about trust and communication. And so I can't say enough about rapport. But yeah, just other things to keep in mind. We want to be energetic. Guys can be loud, as you all, I'm sure, are aware. I've got 2 boys of my own. It gets really loud in the house sometimes. It's a miracle for today that it's quiet, and that's because they're outside at the pool, thank goodness. Otherwise, this webinar might be a little challenging. But if it's an in-person class, I try to warn teachers, put us in a place, if you can, if we're working in a school where, maybe they're on a break or something on that particular wing of the building. That way we can be loud. Guys, are learning just as well as if they were sitting quietly at a desk, if not better. And even though they might be loud and moving around, that's really the most effective ways for most guys to learn. And we're generalizing, Of course, we know that not all guys are going to act a certain way or need the exact same type of learning style. But just in general, most guys, it seems like that can be really effective to shake things up now and then, and allow them to get out of their chairs, allow them to get loud at times, things like that. Other things, of course, just to recap, handshakes or fist bumps. Now it's air hugs, right? Or just waving over the camera at each other. But anything you can do to build that rapport, complimenting them, when they ask a question, that's a great question. Thanks for bringing that up. Or that's a good point if they interject something. Anything we can do to just keep encouraging them to participate, okay? Learning their names, of course, is another way to build rapport, and I know that can take some time. If you're like me, it can be tough at first to remember names, and usually I have to take some notes of some kind, maybe next to their name on the attendance sheet. I've got some descriptive on them, like if they wear glasses, and then next to that, any other thing like color hair, anything I can do to try to help people or help myself so I can remember some names. And so those are just some basic things to keep in mind. Other strategies when it comes to rapport and the work that we do, of course, we don't want to do any harm to anybody. And by that, we mean we don't want to share information that's not accurate. We want to make sure that the time that we have with them, we are giving them honest and accurate information. We're not being judgmental, because we're reflections of the field, right? So if we're in the human services field, and if we do any harm by giving them some bad information or being judgmental, that reflects on the field, right? And so the next time they come in contact with somebody, another person from the field, they might be a little bit more cautious about that because of the interaction they've had with us. And you may have seen this before because of interactions they've had with other people before they've talked to you. And so anything we can do to make sure they know that we're a trusted person, we're going to try to give accurate information. We're going to be honest. If we don't know the answer, we'll look it up together. Things like that can help build trust again. We've talked about the hands-on work when we can and the kinetic learning when we can. There's ways that we'll talk about that in a little bit, how you can do that online as well. Other things just to keep in mind, things like humor. If you're the humorous person out there, let that show in your teaching if you can, if you're comfortable doing that. Any stories or role plays that you use, depending on what lesson you're covering, if there's ways to get the point across through a story or a role play instead, those are great things to do. Competitive team activities, lots of guys love that. And so like Kahoot again, you give an opportunity to do some of that stuff. And then with the information that we share, so if we're talking about sexual health, one thing that we've seen sometimes, guys get, I wouldn't say it's a stigma, but some people can get a little bit concerned sometimes about what they think the guys are going to be willing to listen to and talk about, and what they worry maybe the guys don't want to talk about. And so just keep in mind, you've got a lot of young men out there that when it comes to sexual health, they've chosen to be abstinent. And they may not say that out loud, but when we're talking to them, we shouldn't just focus on the contraception piece. And I've seen that sometimes where there's just this assumption made that guys are going to be sexually active. So let's just make sure that they are protected. And that's great. You definitely want to cover that. But at the same time, we want to balance that information with that it's okay to also be waiting to have sex if that's your choice, and allowing them some time to kind of talk through, and some lessons that help them talk through, how to remain abstinent if they decide to do that. And so just really having a nice balanced approach can be very helpful for our young men, because a lot of young men are waiting. And so, by the time they're 18, give or take, only about half of guys are usually sexually active. And so we don't want to make this assumption that they're already sexually active, because it's also sending another message to guys that they should be having sex when that's really not the case. And if we want to be helpful, let's talk about all of it then, because a lot of guys are still going to want to listen and engage with you talking about those things. All right, moving on. I know these are all basics, and so I just appreciate the patience as I review these. One of the big ways to engage young men is to talk about myths. And so if you're recruiting young men into a class, a program, trying to build rapport with them, even if it's one-on-one, talking through just what they've heard and just asking them. There's a lot of myths out there, especially now with the way we've got our social media set up, right? Lots of great ways to get information. Unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation still out there. And so, where are the trusted sources? And so one thing I try to do when I'm recruiting guys that I'm trying to work with in a program is I want to let them know that, it's okay to be curious about some of the things they may have heard. And so a lot of what my early work is, usually when I'm trying to build trust, is finding out what they've heard. And so one example to share with you, and this might be something that's still a myth that's common in West Virginia, it may not. It's very big here in North Carolina still, and it has been for several years, and that is the myths around Mountain Dew. And if you're not familiar with some of those myths, so here in North Carolina, the myth is that if a guy drinks Mountain Dew, it's going to possibly do two things. It's going to shrink his penis, and it's going to kill his sperm count. And so there are several young men and probably some grown men who would never touch Mountain Dew ever because they are so afraid of the myths around their sexual health and what it's going to do. And guys are so afraid that, they're going to suddenly shrink into Smurf penises and it's going to be terrible. And so that's where I'll start, because that's a big common myth with a lot of the young men that I serve directly. And just clearing the air, and just, of course, soda's not great for you to begin with, but there's no added consequence of anything shrinking. And so that's where I start. And if I can tap into what the guys are really the most concerned about, or the things that they're the most curious about when it comes to some of the myths they've heard, then I can suddenly now grab their attention, right? They're definitely listening. They're asking more questions now about other things they've heard, and you got them. And so the first day when I'm talking to guys, I just want to build in some time. And now more than ever, right? Since we're online now, in most cases, instead of in person, we just want to build in some additional time and make sure we don't rush right into the material that we're trying to cover. We want to allow time for that rapport to build. And if you're focused on sexual health, being able to talk to guys about the myths is where I start. Because if I can show them that I'm there to help, and I'm going to clear up some of the myths for them, and again, I'm doing it in a non-judgmental way, we can have some laughs, first of all, about some of these myths. And so you can tie some humor into that. But you're also clearing up the myths, right? So you're able to slide in the education and clear up all that misinformation by having some good laughs, just talking about the things that we've heard as we grow up, and clarifying things and giving them the facts. So that's where I start. And so if Mountain Dew is still something big as a myth in West Virginia, I would try to tap into that and bring that up possibly. If you're looking for another way to kind of build a connection, or just ask the guys, what are the myths that you've heard growing up, maybe from your buddies or whatnot, but what are some things that we could clear up here and talk about? Because this is a place where, again, we're going to give you all the information we can. And that's something else I start off with in like a first day kind of introduction, working with my young men. I'll talk about how, I'm not here to tell you what's right or wrong. I'm not here to tell you what you should or should not be doing. All I'm here to do is give you some information. And you're smart enough that, you choose what to do with that information. And if you're wise, then you're going to take that information to heart, and you're going to make some informed choices based off of the facts. And so that's kind of how I start things off. And then we talk about myths, and then we kind of go from there. And so that's just one effective way that I've seen to really build some rapport with guys. And if you can do it in a way where when you're sharing humor, if it's humor about yourself, and of course not at the, not making someone else in the group, any one of the guys, a victim of that humor, the guys will start to open up about some of those things and share another myth they've heard. And that's the key, right? If we can get them to open up and talk, then eventually when they have a question, they'll be more comfortable to ask that, hopefully, in the group. And of course, we want to allow other vehicles for that. So if they still don't want to talk in the group and ask a question, then another vehicle might mean, texting a question or emailing a question to me. because that's how some guys are just going to roll. Other guys, you know, they will share everything with you the first day. It doesn't matter who's in the class. And so just making sure you've got those types of avenues for guys to communicate with you, depending on their comfort level. But yeah, myths are a great way to kind of open the door, I think. And so that's one suggestion if you're having a hard time with some groups, because I've been there too, is to just maybe talk about myths a little bit, things that they've heard. All right. Let's transition into talking about healthy masculinity now. Okay. So if you're working with young men, I feel like talking about masculinity is something that is a must do. There are pretty much every young man out there has dealt with in some way, some type of pressure to quote unquote, man up, right? And so if we don't address healthy masculinity, then I feel like we're doing guys a disservice, because that is a whole nother element that they've been dealing with for such a long time that it can really affect their behaviors. And we're going to talk about some of those behaviors in a minute. But yeah, you know, young guys are bullied sometimes based on how they act as a man and what type of masculinity they're demonstrating. They can be bullied by in romantic relationships based on if they're not, again, showing those traditional masculine norms. So it's not just other guys that pressure them in some ways. It could be someone, an intimate partner sometimes, or someone that they're hoping to be in a relationship with that may think that they're not manly enough. So they can get it from anywhere. They get messages too, right, from parents about what manhood should look like. And sometimes those messages can be positive or negative. They get messages from coaches and teachers about what manhood should look like as well. And again, those can be positive or negative. And then from other places, of course, the media is a huge one as well. Just the image of what manhood is supposed to look like in music videos or in movies. And so even though we're in 2020, there's been some progress for sure, but there's still this kind of rigid structure to what masculinity is supposed to look like. And so this is called the man box, and this is not my term for it. And you've probably heard this before, but just in case you haven't, this is a term that's been around for a while. Some other experts out there, sociologists, they have kind of coined this term. So you'll see some other things online about the man box. I would recommend that if you are more interested in learning more about the man box, I would go to YouTube. There's some great free stuff on YouTube. There's a gentleman named Tony Porter that you might want to check out that talks about the man box as well. And so, yeah, if you don't talk about the man box with guys, I feel like you're kind of missing a little bit of the equation to helping them make some better choices and think about their future and their goals. Okay. There's just so much to this man box that it can really affect, their health, their relationships, and the health of those relationships. And so just really allowing guys to kind of pull the curtain back on some of the pressure that they have been experiencing, whether it's internally or from, external sources like family or friends, and really just talking through just some of the things that are out there and what is okay when it comes to manhood. So this activity is called the man box. If you decide you want to use something like this, we're going to go through a lesson very similar to it. You can use a whiteboard, find some photos that you like. And it's all about just what does manhood look like? And I've used a lot of these lessons, not just with high school guys, but with middle school guys too. So anywhere from ages 12 to 18, I would say these are going to be pretty useful. Maybe a little younger, depending on what you think. And you, of course, are going to know your guys best. So if you think even some younger guys can use some of these lessons, feel free. But usually what I see is about ages 12 to 18, usually 7th grade and up. Okay. All right. So what we're going to start with, and there's a couple ways to do this. Usually what I do is I show a couple pictures to kind of get guys thinking. And so I will start with the man box. I'll write that on the board, and whether that's the whiteboard in Zoom or the whiteboard in person, and ask the guys if they've ever heard of the man box. And usually guys are going to say no, because they've never heard a term for this before. But then I talk about the media, and just if the media was the one place that guys got information about what a man is supposed to be like, what would that man be? And we're going to, just to give the heads up to your guys, you want to tell them, I'm not saying we agree with everything that the media says about being a man, but we are going to put all this stuff up on our whiteboard, whether we agree or not, because that's the information that's out there. Okay. Now, in your head, you're trying to categorize. Okay. There are going to be things that definitely fit the man box, and some great things that the guys are going to say that don't fit the man box. And you'll see what I mean in a second. But be organizing them in your head. Which things are going to fit in the man box, which things would be outside the man box. And I'll show you that diagram here in just a second. And if I have some groups or some one-on-one talks with guys, and I'm not really getting much in the way of input yet, it's kind of crickets, then I'll show them a photo like this one. And so here we have a gentleman who's a boxer, it looks like, right? And I'll just ask the guys, what is it about this guy that might make him manly? And of course, you're going to hear things like he knows how to fight, he's brave, he's got muscles, right? He's bald, whatever they come up with. And I'm throwing everything up on the whiteboard, no matter what it is, okay? I'm just organizing, like I said, what fits in the man box, what doesn't, okay? And from there, we get going. And then I move to the next photo. So just some traditional things, right? This guy would totally be in the man box because he's that tough kind of macho guy, right? Muscles, strength, knows how to fight, all that stuff. And once we feel like we've covered our bases and the guys are ready to move on, we'll do another kind of traditional, maybe image of manhood. And in this case, we have a firefighter. Now, one quick caveat, right, before we get into this, there's assumptions made that this is a guy, and, we don't know. This could be a female for all we know, right? And so that's something I'll bring up with the guys if they don't bring it up with me first, which sometimes they will, okay? But once we get through that, we're making an assumption it's even a guy to begin with. What are some things that might make this person manly, if it is a guy? And so things like he's brave, right? He's courageous. He's risking his life. Some guys will say he's got weapons. Those are just some of the more common examples I'll hear from gentlemen. And again, I'm just writing all these things up on the whiteboard, all these characteristics, okay? One more, and that is the soldier. And so we have an army soldier here, it looks like. And so things the guys will share with me is he's serving his country. He knows how to fight again. He's brave. Things like that are going to come up. He knows how to use weapons. And so those are some of those traditional things. And if you think about the media, that's still pretty much a lot of what you're going to hear in the media too, right? Things about violence and anger, right? All those things. And so from there, once you feel like you're in a good spot, you should have something kind of like this. And so this is kind of like your cheat sheet now, okay? And so the man box, these are the traditional characteristics of the man box. And so this should be what's kind of in your head. So when guys mention some of these things, like you're just like, boom, yep, that's right. And you're just writing them in the box. Anything that doesn't fit the box, you're just going to write it somewhere outside of the box. Okay. And so if a guy says something like, well, he's supposed to be smart, that's awesome. Unfortunately, that's not something the media usually portrays though. Right. And so we're totally going to acknowledge it, but we're going to write it up on the board on the outside. And so by the time it's all said and done, you're going to have some other characteristics on the outside, like being sensitive and loving. But traditionally, these are the things in the man box. And once you get to a place where the guys have just shared everything they can, then you can move into a segment on just what are some of the consequences, okay? And I guess real quick before I move into this, please, 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 I'm not saying that everything in the man box is bad. There are some really good things in the man box. There's nothing wrong with being athletic and nothing wrong with being brave. Some of the other traditional things that we could put in the box are things like being a provider and a protector, right? And there's totally nothing wrong with those things. What I try to explain to guys, if you think about maybe a show you've watched in the past where the kids in the show are maybe in like a science class and they're dealing with chemicals, what usually happens in the show with the chemicals? And what usually they'll say is, well, they mixed them up and they shouldn't have been mixed up, right? And there was an explosion. And that's kind of how the man box works. There's a lot of characteristics that by themselves seems pretty harmless. Some of them, again, are positive. But when you start putting them together in this kind of equation, let's say, in a situation. So if the gentleman is in a relationship and he's been told all his life that he's supposed to be aggressive and dominant, and that the only emotion he's allowed to show is anger, right? Then what's going to happen? There's definitely a greater chance. I'm not saying it's guaranteed, but there's a greater risk that that guy is going to think it's okay to put his hands on his partner, right? Because of the fact that he's been told all his life, this is how a guy is supposed to act. And so depending on, his role models, how much his friends are kind of glorifying the man box, it's all going to depend, of course, on influences. And it's still definitely his choice, right? He can control his own behavior. But if these are the values, the things that he thinks being a man is what it's all about, then unfortunately, he's more likely to act on those things. So consequences can include things like dating violence, right? Sexual assault, rape, teen pregnancy, because guys are told, especially in the media, that there's no consequences to sex. You'll have two people in a show have sex, and the next day, it's like nothing happened, right? So there's definitely a greater risk of unplanned pregnancies, teen pregnancies, STDs. Women are treated like objects. So yeah, you've got the whole healthy relationship piece that's just kind of out the window there. A lot more domestic violence. Guys are more likely to die. I mean, if they're trying to be brave, because you'll have some gentlemen who will think that, they've got to one up each other. They've got to be even more manly. There's the term, hypermasculinity that's out there, where guys feel like they have to always be in control and they have to be even more manly than their buddy. And so if one of their buddies brags about something he's done, like something simple, like maybe he did some stunt on his skateboard. Well, the other guy might feel like, I got to show him up and I've got to do an even bigger stunt on my skateboard. And so you kind of have this back and forth sometimes, depending on the peer group, where guys feel like they have to, man up each other and one up each other, and so that bravery piece, they can't show fear at all. They can't back down. And that's why you'll see some guys, right, where they can't back down from a fight, even though they know it's probably not going to be great. There's going to be some consequences, whether it's suspension or, just even physical, pain. They're still going to go through with it because they are so afraid, some of these guys, that they're going to lose their man card, right? And so a lot of these behaviors that we're trying to address with our young men, whether it's teen pregnancy prevention or sexual violence prevention, or any of those other types of drug prevention, any of these things that we know are going to be harmful for guys and their partners. A lot of it ties back to just what is their definition of manhood? What are their values when it comes to what a man is supposed to be like? And if this is all it is, then that can be really, really harmful to him and to everyone around him, unfortunately. And so this lesson is really about awareness. It's about pulling back the curtain, like I said, and just trying to help young men know that, we get them, that we know something that you're dealing with, that you've either had someone tell you how to be a man, and it's got some of these characteristics in it. And maybe you were doing something different and they said something to you about, that's not what a man does. Now, usually it's not as nice as that. Usually it's something harmful, like being called a name, right? And some bullying. And so a lot of the terms that we hear our young men say sometimes, things, and I'm keeping it clean, of course, for our webinar today, but we know there's a lot of other words that can be used, unfortunately. But some of these other words, like wuss and sissy and wimp, these words are really intended to push guys back into the man box. And so, yeah, if he steps out for just a second, figuratively speaking, if he steps out of the box and let's say he's sensitive or he's kind, or he, God forbid, he cries because of something that happened, then some other guy potentially, or even internally, he might say, no, don't be a sissy. I got to wipe the tears away and I've got to, got to man up, right? And so these words are used to really help push guys back into the box. And so the next thing I do with this lesson is just talking with guys then about, is the box healthy or unhealthy, and seeing if I can get some buy-in, or encouraging the guys to push back. Because some of the guys, based on their life experiences, they might, again, have been told all their lives that this is what a guy is supposed to be like. And so now you're having a lesson telling some of the gentlemen maybe in your group or individually that everything that they've learned is maybe not so good, right? Without really coming up directly and saying that. And so you're not going to have every guy say, you know what, Ted, you're exactly right. I'm going to stop doing this. There's going to be some pushback on this from some of the gentlemen that you're working with possibly. And so I encourage my guys to have any pushback if they want to, because the more they share again, their input, their ideas, their experiences, the rest of the group gets to hear this. They can talk about their experiences as well. And again, this is a judgment-free zone, and we're just pulling back the curtain. And so this first lesson that I might start out with, the man box, once we've kind of built some of that trust, is really just to plant some seeds and try to help guys see that there's not just one particular way to be a man. And in fact, that one particular way may not be very helpful, right? And it may cause some problems. And then I'll talk to the guys about examples, things like sports. And so some of the guys, I'll give an example like around anger. The man box is a lot about anger. And so, baseball has started back again, or it's trying. In the past, I'll just ask guys, anybody ever seen a pitcher get really mad? Let's say he had a really bad day, bad game. And so what does the pitcher do when he gets into the dugout? He starts throwing things right, might throw his glove. He might take out the water cooler because, of course, it's the water cooler's fault that he had a bad outing. And then, unfortunately, for a few of those pitchers, they're not thinking so great, and they take their, $10 million hand, and unfortunately, what do? And they punch the concrete wall in the dugout. And now the hand's broken, and they're out for probably the year. And so a guy in the man box, I'll use that as an example to just show that, a guy in this man box, his anger gets the best of him. And in fact, guys are going to use that type of expression. They're going to say, oh, my anger just got the best of me. Or I just saw red, or I just couldn't control myself. Well, that was the man box talking. And so when we're talking to guys about anger, a guy who has stepped out of this box, that sees that there's really other things that are missing, he's the one who's in control of his anger. And I'm not saying, that anger is bad. We can't control it when we get angry. It's a natural emotion, but we can control how we respond to it, right? And so I'll even use the man box to talk about things like anger management and how, a healthy masculinity vision, guys are better able to handle their anger. They can communicate through it. They can talk about their feelings. And there's so much on the outside. So once you get kind of through this piece, you can ask those guys that you've been working with on this, what are the things they're missing? If this is all they've experienced, or these things in the box, what are some things that they're missing, right? Because, being brave 24/7, that's got to be exhausting, I would think. Not being able to cry about anything, is that even possible? Like, what if someone died that you loved? And really just kind of breaking down the fact that this is not even anything anyone can live up to. This is way too impossible. And it's just not realistic. Guys can't be just these things. We're not robots. And so getting guys to share some of those other things on the outside, things like being responsible and respectful and caring and kind and smart, if they haven't mentioned it already, then I'm really encouraging guys at this point to share some of those things. And that it's okay to take any of the good stuff that they like in the box, like being strong or tough or athletic, and walking out of the box with them so that they can experience the things that aren't allowed in this box. It also means perhaps changing their language. So the other thing, like kind of a take home for guys, just for them to consider, is if you think the man box is not healthy, what words are you using in your vocabulary now that might be reinforcing the man box, right? And I'll talk about, just my childhood for a second with this. I'll ask the guys, how many of you have ever used one of these words in red or something like it before when you're talking to other guys? Maybe you call them a name like that. And I'm going to raise my hand too. And so without even realizing it, we have reinforced the man box, right? We've pushed another guy into the man box. And then on the flip side, how many of you guys have been called one of these names before? And I'll raise my hand too. When I was a kid, I remember getting called a time or two or whatever name of some of these names. So we've also been victims of the man box, where our friends, our so-called friends, pushed us into this box, right? And would our friends, if they really were our friends, use some of these words? Probably not. But again, we get so tied up into this box, right? And our friends get tied up in the box too sometimes, that it can be, really challenging to kind of take a step away from it and just realize what's happening. And that's kind of what this whole talk is about. Once you kind of feel like you've gone through that conversation with them some, it's time to test the waters out a little bit. And again, I'm not saying you're going to get full buy-in after this one little talk. And we're talking maybe 45 minutes, perhaps, depending on how much time you have with the guys. But there's some other photos that I'll share. And I'll encourage the guys to start, thinking about, what does that definition of manhood really look like in real life, instead of what the media perhaps has said that guys should be like. And so the first type of picture I'll show, just to give you some other examples here to try to help stretch this, or break out of it, I should say. So we have a gentleman holding a baby. And so, you think about, we're assuming, but a caring, maybe responsible father here, right? Showing his affection and love for his child. That's totally outside the box based on the definitions we just talked about. And I'll just ask the guys, is this guy a man? And most of the guys, if not all, will say, yeah, he's being a good dad. Another picture, and you're going to know your guys best. So you think about the types of comments that you might hear, and then the type of pictures you might need to show, okay? If they're already buying into the fatherhood one, great. But if you already heard some comments about being a dad, then this might be something to show, okay? Another one I'll show is this gentleman. And I'll immediately, from some of the guys, go, oh, nerd, something like that. And so I'm going to challenge them, like, guys, we just talked about the man box, right? And so what does being your own man mean? And I'll just ask them that. What does that mean? And you're going to get responses like, it's about being yourself, right? It's about not worrying so much what other people think about you. And then I'll ask, well, does this guy, do you think, worry what other people think about him then? And of course not. He's being his own man. So sure, he doesn't fit into that stereotypical man box like we just talked about. This is a guy who's already walked out of the box. And I'm not saying that you have to look this way either, but this is a guy who doesn't worry about that stuff anymore. He's decided to be who he wants to be. And that's what we want for all of you, is to be who you want to be. And then the last picture I'll show is a gentleman who does, or assuming does ballet maybe. And immediately you're going to hear some comments from a few of the guys, possibly things like, oh, gay, or maybe unfortunately something worse, some other slang for that. And we're going to acknowledge that, let's talk about stereotypes for a minute. And are we just assuming that just because he likes ballet, suddenly we make this jump into his sexual orientation? And would you like it if people assumed things about you based on, how you looked or how you dressed, or the activities that you enjoy doing? And again, is this guy being his own man? Nothing wrong with doing ballet if that's what he enjoys to do. And in fact, I'll challenge them, like, what do some football players do in the off season? Well, they do ballet. It helps them with their balance, staying on their feet. So, running back hits the hole during a football game. If he's taking ballet, it's going to help him take that hit and hopefully stay on his feet and keep running, right? And some football players will do this. Then they'll take ballet. So, it's all about expanding our definitions again. And so these last photos are to try to help expand and challenge some of our guys on some of their rigid thinking about what masculinity should look like, okay? And that type of conversation then that you've started with perhaps or interjected at some point should now be, at times, I'm not saying all the time, but anytime you hear a comment that kind of goes back to the man box in your additional work, your future work with some of the guys you're working with, you know, bring that up again, because they may not have thought about it. They may not have connected the two. Okay. And I've had guys in my classes. I'm fortunate enough with some of the work I've done that I can see the same guy, hopefully several times, right? And so you'll have some guys that after you do this type of lesson, they will suddenly be the man box police. And so if in another class down the road, a guy makes a comment that's totally man box, they'll call him out and say, oh, man box. And we can have a little conversation then about that. And how that, yeah, that's how some guys might think. And so I appreciate you sharing your thought, because again, this is something that we're not gonna, you know, break out of overnight. But yeah, let's take a second and talk about that a little bit again. Okay. And how other guys might react to that, feeling pressured again to conform. And again, this is all about, you know, being your own person. And when you're being your own person, you're more likely to make some choices that are better for you, right? And then better for your partners then down the road. And so, yeah, if we can help guys kind of break out of some of these harmful norms, and that takes time, but if we can even just plant seeds with some of the guys we might see for a very short period of time, it can be very helpful down the road, that they have some positive person in their lives that talks a little bit about maybe another way that we can be masculine, instead of just what they maybe see on TV or hear on the hearing music all the time, potentially. All right. So that is the man box. Very easy to replicate. Again, all it takes is a whiteboard, some photos. And if you feel like you're not quite confident yet to replicate some of that, there's some additional stuff on YouTube for sure. A gentleman named Tony Porter talks a lot about the man box and some of his work. Yeah, it can be very helpful in helping some guys to either reflect on their personal beliefs, but also reflect maybe on their behaviors, or maybe prevent some future behaviors that could be harmful for them and the people they're around. All right. Let's segue then into our next piece. Let me back up a second. Something I forgot to mention. So one of the other dangers about this man box, real quick, and then I promise we'll move on, is this whole not asking for help. That's huge, right? We have jokes for guys who don't ask for directions, right? And thank goodness GPS came around, because without GPS, we'd have a lot of lost guys again who would refuse to stop at the gas station and ask someone for how to get to where they need to go. Well, a lot of young men still deal with this, and they always have to feel like they know the answer to something, even though they most likely don't. You see this a lot in school, where guys, they could be in math class, let's say, and they are just silent. They may not quite get what the lesson is about in math, and they struggle and they might fail a test, but they're not going to be vocal about what's going on and that they don't get it, because again, for some of it, it's really tied into being a man, and it looks like a sign of weakness, right? So if a guy has to ask for help, he's worried that other guys are going to think he's weak because he had to ask for help. So you see it academically kind of play out sometimes with guys who might struggle in school and don't want to speak up. And so we've got to be really aware if we are working in that type of setting on how to help guys with that and ask them about it and try to prompt some information out of them so that we can help them if they are having problems or challenges. You see this also around health, right? Sorry, a lot of guys will not ask for help either when it comes to when they're ill. They're told, right, to suck it up. Coach might say, oh, you got hurt, practicing, you're all right. Rub some dirt on it, right? You'll be okay. Get back up. And so those messages, again, can stay with guys. Older men, I've heard older men brag before about, I haven't been to a doctor in, 20 years or whatever it is. And they think that's such like a great thing. And unfortunately, there might be something going on that they don't know because they haven't gotten a physical in maybe 20 years, right? So you've got some health related things tied into this as well. And then again, with relationships, but even, academically, I want to make sure I pointed that out. Very good. Those are some of the big ones. All right, let's segue into our last, hopefully, tool, and I call this YAMS. And for YAMS, YAMS stands for, ooh, fancy slide. All right. And so when we talk about relationships, and we're really focusing with this lesson on things like informed consent. So if two people are going to be in a sexual relationship, there should be 4 things, just to try to make it simple for guys, 4 things that should be in place, okay? It's not enough anymore to say no means no, right? That's not going far enough. If you really want to get that informed consent and make sure that everything is on the up and up, then ask your partner, hey, do you want to have sex? And get that verbal yes. And I'll joke with guys, hopefully your partner's going to go, yeah, woohoo, let's do it, right? But something verbal. And that way you've got the verbal consent. Yes means yes instead of no means no, okay? There should be no alcohol or other drugs involved. The M stands for, it kind of relates to the A. So if no alcohol or other drugs are involved, then for the M, they should both be mentally able to consent to whatever is going to happen in their intimate relationship, okay? And then the S is, to try to stick to people that are your own age. So, and I know that every state's a little different perhaps in some of the ages. And so we won't really get into that much, but if you like this type of activity, you just might want to tailor it a little bit so that it fits your state laws. If they're slightly off from what North Carolina has. I know every state's just a little bit different perhaps, okay? But encouraging guys to stick to people their own age. And the other thing I'll add to that is, how are you going to know they're your own age? Well, it means you got to talk to them, right? You got to get to know them a little bit, hopefully. God forbid we actually date these days and get to know people first. And I'll just joke around with guys about that. But, get to know them, because then you'll know, it'll eventually come out, or you'll figure it out that they are either too young for you or maybe even too old for you. Who knows? But stick to people your own age. So those are the 4 things for YAMS. And we try to break it into this acronym to try to help guys remember it. And I've had guys, like years later, if they see me in the hallway, they maybe were a 9th grader, and now here they are, a senior at a high school, and they see me getting ready to talk to the 9th graders again. It's like, Mr. Ted, YAMS, I remember YAMS. So this seems to stick, which is great, okay? And so we're gonna go through a couple scenarios here. And feel free to use these or something similar. But what you're trying to do is a scenario where they have to figure out, is all of YAMS in place, or is something missing, one of these letters, or maybe multiple, okay? And so if you're in person, you might have the scenarios up on the walls, and the guys might have stickers, like a green sticker for yes, all of YAMS is there, or a yellow sticker for I'm not really sure, or a red sticker for no, there's something missing. That's the YAMS is not there. And then once the guys have moved around and put their stickers up on each of the scenarios, you can come back to their chairs and have a group discussion about each of them and go through the answers and things. Online, if you're working with a group of guys, you can kind of do YMCA with it almost. So if you think about roller skating, or even if you hear YMCA on the radio, right? You suddenly start doing your Y with your hands, and your A, right? And your M and the S, maybe you're doing like the walk like the Egyptian thing with the S, right? So if you have all the guys on camera with you, that are willing to be on camera, and it's totally fine, of course, if some of the guys opt out of that part, but if they are on camera, they can even physically make the letter that's missing perhaps, or they can just shout it out what's missing, okay? So I'm just gonna walk you through a couple of the scenarios that you might wanna consider, but feel free to make your own, of course. But it all relates back to YAMS, okay? So for example, let's say we have 2 people, person A and person B. They're both 16 and they've been kissing passionately. Person A starts to undress person B, and person B says to person A, person B says no. Person A thinks that B is just kind of playing hard to get, and that person B really wants to have more going on but doesn't want to admit it. And so person A keeps trying to undress, okay? After trying to push person away off several times and saying no repeatedly for 5 minutes, person B eventually just stops struggling and just lies there. Person A continues to move ahead and has sex with person B. And so then you ask the guys, all right, what's missing? Is any part of YAMS, the Y, A, M, or S missing? Okay. And we've got a verbal yes. Are there no alcohol or other drugs involved? Are they both mentally able to make the decision to have consent? And are they sticking to people their own age? Okay. Well, it looks like they're sticking to people their own age, right? They're both 16. Seems like no alcohol is involved. And the real question then is there a verbal yes? And in fact, we have the exact opposite, right? We have person B saying repeatedly no. And so, yeah, the Y is missing. And therefore, that should have never happened, right? They should have respected them when they said no and stopped. Okay. Next scenario, person A, who is 17, has been going out with person B, who's 19, for about 6 months. Person B has told person A that they really should have sex. Person A, though, was unsure about having sex. Person A knows friends who have had sex and is concerned that person B might break up with them if they don't have sex. And so the next time they're intimate, they have sex. Okay. So a little bit more subtle, right? Person A isn't really pressuring them too much. It's not like the first scenario. It's kind of more some internal pressure, right? But again, is anything still missing in the Y, A, M, and S? Okay. Depending on state law, here in North Carolina, technically the 17 and 19 would be okay. And so the S would be there. They're still sticking to people pretty close to their own age. Again, no alcohol or other drugs are involved, so the A and the M are there. But again, do we have the Y? They've never actually verbally said yes, right? And so, unfortunately, no, the consent, again, is not there, right? And so these scenarios are a little bit different in the way that we have someone really pressuring somebody. And in the second scenario, again, it's a little bit more kind of internal pressure. But for anybody we're talking to, especially guys, we want them to, again, the verbal yes is so important, you know, because they might be having sex with someone and technically it might look like consent. But again, it's all about having that conversation ahead of time, or else how are you going to get the verbal yes? And so just talking to guys about, you know, even practicing those skills. How do you bring up the conversation of sex if that's something that's on your mind? And then how do you initiate making sure that consent's there? And it's just simply asking the guy for a line. How would you tell your partner you want to have sex? And how do you ask your partner for consent? And it can be just as simple as, is this okay with you? And that it's not going to kill the mood. Okay. But this is a good way to kind of segue into that further dialogue. And these are some real concrete examples to try to help guys see the difference and what's still missing there. And yeah, we'll stop in just a second. I'm almost done. And then we'll definitely get to some questions, I promise. Only got 2 more. All right, scenario 3. So person A and B are both 19. So we've got the S, right? They're sticking to people their own age, and they're both adults in this case anyway. They're both over 18. They're classmates in college. They've been dating for a few months and are very attracted to each other. They verbally agree that they want to have sex, and after agreeing to use a condom, they have sex. So is anything missing? And no. So we've got here a valid consensual situation where sex was going to be okay then. Both people agreed to it. Everything was in place. They were fine. Okay. So that's kind of a healthy example for them. All right. The last one. So one evening, person A, who is 14, is at a party and is drinking a lot of alcohol. Person A meets person B, who's 18. So we got a 4-year age gap here. One's 14, one's 18, and they're dancing. Person A, who is 14, is flirting with person B throughout the night, kisses person B passionately. After a while, though, person A isn't feeling so well. I wonder why, guys. Why would person A maybe not be feeling so well? It might be the alcohol, right? And decides to head to a bedroom to lie down. Person B finds person A in the bedroom, and they continue to kiss. Person A appears very aroused and responsive to person B, and they have sex. So, do we have yams, or is anything missing? And in this case, And again, you'll want to check with state laws. This, I think, in most states on the age gap difference is going to be the same either way, but double check that again, because you're the experts with West Virginia law, not I. But for most states, if not all, the answer is going to be no to any of these, right? I've got them all highlighted yellow. Every single one is not in place. Nobody said a verbal yes. There was alcohol involved, and so the A is not there. They're not really mentally able to have consent then because they're drunk, right? And we have a big age difference. And so yams is a big no on this one. And so again, the guy or whoever person B was should have not followed that person or just checked on them, but it shouldn't have led to what happened where they were having sex, okay? So that's the yams activity. Feel free to use that if it's something you like, or modify if you want. And then again, you've got scenarios, and you can, again, if you want to do it on camera, just encourage the guys to either yell out the letters or type it in the chat box, or yeah, use their hands and make the Y, A, M, and the S if you want, okay? All right, so that is pretty much the end of my presentation here. We're going to turn it over to questions here in just a second. But real quick before I do, here again is my contact information that I promised. So if at any point you want to talk through any of these 3 lessons that we brought up during the webinar, feel free to email me, or you can call me on my work cell here as well, because I'm working from home like most folks. But feel free to get in touch with me either way. I'm happy to walk you through anything we've talked about today, or if you want to know more about Wise Guys, I'm happy to do that too. Okay, I will stop sharing my screen there. And we'll turn it over to any questions. And I really appreciate everyone being patient and letting me run through that. So any questions now? And I promise I'm going to shut up. Go ahead.
I know we had a few questions in the chat. Were all of those answered? Does anybody have any others?
Yeah, that last scenario definitely is a good way to get on the sex offender list. That's true.
Yes.
I'm scrolling up too, but yeah, yeah, if you see any of the questions, you want to repeat them, feel free on your end.
Thank you very much for this presentation. I'm getting texts like crazy from the people that I work with, and they're just loving it. Fortunately, we are using it with some of our classes. So we do have the curriculum here, and they'll be able to look through it a little bit better. But this was great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. If there's, I'm just checking through here, or if you're seeing any, I'm just making sure I'm not ignoring a question. I'm sorry that the Kahoot didn't seem to be cooperating for some folks.
That was a learning experience.
Yeah.
I tried to post this to Facebook as well. That was also a learning experience.
Ah, I hear you.
That's okay. By the end of this pandemic, we should have all this technology down.
Oh, that's a good question. How do you handle it when they don't believe you that the myth isn't true? So we'll start with that one. So yeah, you're going to have some guys that just based again on, personal experiences, possibly, it's hard for them to trust other people, or they just firmly believe, that what they know is got to be right. Right. And, the last thing we want to do is get into some sort of confrontation almost, where it's like, how do you not believe me? We definitely don't want to try to go down that kind of avenue, right? And so I'll just tell guys, it's up to you if you want to believe this or not. But I can show them, this is where, and have, some resources on hand. I think Fact Forward is probably a good resource to have. Mission West Virginia is another good resource to have for sure. So if you've got someone who's pushing back on the myth or the facts that you're sharing around the myth, you can always, refer them to another resource that you've already checked out that is trusted, and say, hey, if you don't believe me and take my word for it, that's totally fine. I understand. If I were you, you want to look up things on your own, and I get it. And so here's some other places you might want to check that out, because they've got some trusted information they can share with you too. And then move on, hopefully, because the last thing I want to do is just get into this combative dialogue with them for the next, unfortunately, 5 to 10 minutes maybe, or whatever it is? That's a great question. Anyone else want to add to that? Feel free, but yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents on that one. Oh, seltzer water. Oh my goodness. Yep. I've heard seltzer water, as a, wow. Okay. Or yeah, shaking up a Coke bottle I've heard afterward and squirting that in the vagina because that'll kill sperm or something crazy. Who on earth is going to let them do that? But yeah, there's a whole bunch of myths out there, right? Crazy myths. I keep telling people one day I'm going to write a book with all the myths and hopefully make lots of money because some of these myths are just insane. Any other, let me see, questions that I might see? I'm sorry if some folks were having some technical difficulties.
It will be available, just give us a couple of days, it'll be available on our website. If anyone missed a portion or if you have someone else who'd like to review it, it'll be up there for a few days. And then also for CEUs, I'll be sending out a follow-up email to everyone. If you need the CEU credit, I will be sending out an evaluation and all of the participant names will be submitted.
Awesome.
2 weeks.
Very good. Well, I think that about covers it, right? Are there any other questions that I may have missed?
One just popped up and it's, have you ever used YAMS or the Man Box with adults?
Yes, we have used the Man Box with, we have another curriculum called Wise Guys, the Next Level. That's used with like college age guys and young adults. We've also worked with some gentlemen in jails, in prisons, and used those activities for that as well. Yes. And you can definitely modify those if you think you need to make them more age appropriate. But yeah, they work very well with pretty much just any age group. Yeah. Very good. Anything else? Feel free. And yeah, all our curriculums are available for purchase. There's training involved and things. And so yeah, anyone who's interested in that stuff, feel free to contact me later. No problem. Very good. Well, thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to any feedback that's collected. So if you guys wouldn't mind forwarding me that later, if you're collecting it, I'd love to just hear how people liked it or anything I can improve. Okay.
Well, so far I can tell you we are loving it.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you all for taking time out of your afternoon and take care and stay safe.
Thank you. You too.
Appreciate it.
Thank you everybody for attending with us again. We'll have our next webinar next Thursday and it'll be on stigma related to STIs. So you're welcome to join in too.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Y'all take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.